The donor section is reserved, Mr. Mercer. Work clothes do not become appropriate simply because your daughter is graduating. I am not asking for a better seat. I am asking you not to punish Lily for being my daughter. Before you take my diploma, Mrs. Vale, every parent here deserves to know what my father did for their children. The last chair had barely stopped scraping when Lily Mercer pointed from the graduation stage toward her father in the dusty brown jacket. Behind Caleb, nearly 400 parents began to rise. Marissa Vale froze beside Lily's diploma. 10 minutes earlier, she had tried to move the Carpenter out of sight. None of them knew that a dented lunchbox in Caleb's truck held evidence that could protect their children and end Vale's authority. A father can absorb humiliation. He cannot allow it to reach his child. If dignity matters, remember this one. 6 weeks earlier, Caleb stood at his kitchen counter deciding whether $11.40 should become gasoline or allergy medicine. Rain tapped the narrow windows of the rented duplex. A cabinet door hung slightly crooked because he had repaired the hinge with a screw salvaged from an old job. On the refrigerator, Lily's latest drawing showed 2 figures beneath a graduation cap, a tall man in a brown jacket and a girl with dark hair. There had once been 3 figures in her drawings. Since her mother died, Lily had stopped leaving an empty space. Caleb counted the bills again, though the arithmetic had not changed. His checking account held $38. The truck needed fuel. Lily needed the medicine before school. He placed the medicine beside her cereal bowl and decided he could walk to the cabinet installation job. Lily entered carrying a cardboard model of the school auditorium. She was 17, observant in the way children become observant when money is scarce, and careful not to ask why the truck keys remained on the hook. "The left ramp still looks wrong," she said. Caleb crouched beside the model. The miniature ramp turned sharply at a landing no wider than his palm. Lily had built the project for the Senior Civic Design Exhibition, a competition Marissa Vale supervised. The winning proposal would be presented to the school board and funded by a community accessibility grant. "What feels wrong?" Caleb asked. "The turn. A wheelchair can reach it, but I don't think a person can make the turn without backing up." Caleb smiled faintly. He never gave Lily answers when a question could give her something better. "Then do not measure the ramp," he said. "Measure the choice a person has at the landing." She studied the cardboard. A minute later, she pulled the landing apart and widened it. Caleb had once spent 15 years calculating choices people would have during earthquakes, fires, and structural failures. His name had appeared beneath the seal of Mercer Structural Collaborative, a respected regional engineering firm he founded with his wife, Hannah. Then a highway collision took Hannah's life while Caleb was inspecting a hospital project 3 counties away. He arrived after the machines had gone silent. Within a year, he sold his partnership, stopped renewing the suits in his closet, and returned to the work his own father had taught him. Wood, joints, levels, and repairs that ended before dinner. He told people he was a carpenter because he was one. He did not tell them what he had been, because Lily needed a father more than the world needed another impressive biography. At school that morning, Marissa Vale arranged the student models beneath white lights in the library. She taught advanced civics and chaired every committee that affected graduation honors. Her precision was famous. Permission slips came back with color-coded tabs. Student speeches were returned with measured notes about posture, pace, and donor sensitivity. Vale was not cruel for pleasure. She had spent 12 years watching enrichment programs disappear whenever wealthy families moved their children elsewhere. The new accessibility grant could keep 3 aides employed and finance the arts program for another year. She believed appearances protected opportunity. Over time, she had begun confusing the two. When Lily carried in her cardboard auditorium, Vale's eyes went first to the repaired corner of the base. "You built this at home?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Without professional assistance?" Lily hesitated. "My dad asked questions." Vale glanced through the library doors. Caleb stood in the corridor holding a level and a battered tool bag. The facilities manager had hired him to repair warped shelving during spring break. Dust marked his sleeves. One boot had been resoled with a darker strip of rubber. "Questions," Vale repeated. Her tone was pleasant enough to survive any complaint. "Your calculations are unusually sophisticated for a high school submission. I did them. I am sure you participated." The sentence was quiet. That made it sharper. Lily looked toward her father. Caleb had heard, but he did not cross the corridor. He held her gaze and tapped 2 fingers against the side of his leg, the signal he had used since she was small. Slow down. Know what is true before you answer. I can show my work, Lily said. Vale smiled. That will not be necessary today. She placed Lily's model at the far end of the display, behind a glossy proposal sponsored by the County Development Association. That model belonged to Grant Holloway, the son of a major school donor. His design kept the existing narrow ramp, covered it with decorative cedar, and devoted most of the budget to a donor wall. Caleb returned to the shelves. He did not argue. But while resetting the lowest case, he noticed that the library floor sloped 3/8 of an inch toward an interior column. The building was old. Small movement was expected. What troubled him was the fresh line of gray filler along the baseboard, an attempt to hide a crack that had reopened. He ran one thumb across it. Fine powder clung to his skin. Is something wrong? Lily asked when Vale had left. Maybe nothing. That means something. Caleb wiped the powder onto a folded shop cloth. It means I need more information. At lunch, he asked the facilities manager for the renovation drawings. The man laughed apologetically and said those records belonged to the district contractor. Caleb asked who had filled the crack. The manager said Marissa Vale had arranged a cosmetic repair before the grant committee toured the school. That afternoon, Caleb walked the exterior wall. A downspout emptied beside the foundation. The soil had settled. One auditorium exit door rubbed at its top corner, and the accessible route passed beneath a masonry canopy supported by the same section of wall. He photographed nothing. He made no accusation. He wrote 4 measurements on the back of a cabinet invoice and slipped it into his lunchbox. Lily found him outside as buses pulled away. Messrs. Vale wants my calculation notebook tomorrow, she said. She says the committee needs to verify authorship. Then give it to her. What if she has already decided? Caleb looked at the auditorium wall, then at his daughter's model held carefully against her chest. A decision is not the same as the truth, he said. Keep your original pages. It was ordinary advice, spoken beside a leaking downspout. Yet before graduation, those original pages would become the only clean record in a building full of altered ones. The next morning, Lily handed over a blue spiral notebook containing every failed sketch, erased dimension, and revised equation behind her proposal. She kept the loose originals in a kitchen drawer as Caleb had advised. Vale accepted the notebook with 2 fingers and placed it inside a locked cabinet. By Friday, Grant Holloway's cedar-covered ramp had been named the competition finalist. Vale announced the result at a parent reception in the auditorium lobby. Grant's father, Russell, stood beside a rendering of the donor wall while photographers recorded his handshake with the principal. Lily's model was absent. The committee found inconsistencies in authorship, Vale told Caleb when he asked where it had gone. Nothing disciplinary. We simply cannot reward work a student may not have completed independently. Which calculation was not hers? Vale aligned a stack of programs before answering. That is a technical question, Mr. Mercer. It was a technical competition. Her smile tightened. Your dedication to your daughter is admirable. But helping build cabinets does not qualify someone to certify structural work. Caleb felt anger arrive as heat behind his ribs. For one dangerous second, he wanted to recite every credential she had not asked about. He wanted to tell her that 3 hospitals and 14 schools carried his seal. Instead, he saw Lily near the doors pretending not to listen. No, he said evenly. It does not. On the walk home, Lily moved 3 steps ahead of him. Why didn't you tell her? She asked. Tell her what? Who you were. The past tense hurt more than he expected. Because your work should not need my resume. Maybe it needs something. Caleb stopped. Lily. She turned, tears held angrily in her eyes. You always say staying quiet is dignity. Sometimes it just lets people lie, he answered too quickly. And sometimes proving yourself to every arrogant person is another way of letting them own you. Lily flinched. Caleb heard his own bitterness after it had already reached her. She walked the remaining blocks without speaking. That night, he found the refrigerator drawing folded in the trash. He smoothed it on the kitchen table and understood his flaw with painful clarity. After Hannah died, he had made quietness into a shelter. He had not noticed when it became a wall his daughter was forced to live behind. He knocked on Lily's door. I was wrong, he said. Silence is not dignity if someone else pays for it. She looked up from her homework. Are you going to tell them? I am going to make them answer the right question. Whether they listen is their choice. On Monday, Caleb submitted a written request for the competition scoring sheets and the building's accessibility inspection. The district office acknowledged it, then sent the request to Vale because she chaired the grant committee. Vale called him during his lunch break. Formal records requests can create unnecessary suspicion, she said. The school is trying to secure funding, not defend itself from one disappointed parent. Then the records will clear everything up. She lowered her voice. Master. Holloway's foundation covers the gap when the district budget fails. If this grant becomes controversial, children lose programs. I am asking you to consider the entire community. Caleb looked across the unfinished kitchen where he was installing cabinets. The homeowner's little boy was doing homework on an overturned bucket because the family had not yet moved in a table. The community includes my daughter, he said. Vale ended the call politely. 2 days later, Caleb lost the school shelving contract. The facilities manager apologized and said the committee wanted a vendor with more complete documentation. The remaining payment was $680, the exact amount Caleb had set aside for Lily's graduation clothes and the overdue electric bill. He sat in his truck outside the school, staring at the cancellation email. For a moment, the offer embedded in Vale's decision was clear. Stop asking, and perhaps ordinary work would return. His hand moved toward the ignition, then stopped when he saw a group of parents carrying lumber through the side entrance. The school had begun building Grant's decorative ramp. Caleb crossed the parking lot and found the construction foreman. He asked whether a permit had been issued for the landing alteration. The foreman showed him a 1-page authorization signed by Vale and an engineering review bearing the name of a district consultant. Caleb recognized the consultant, Daniel Kress, a former junior engineer at his old firm. Kress was competent when careful and reckless when rushed. The review referenced drawings dated 3 years earlier, before drainage work had changed the soil beside the auditorium. Do you have the current settlement survey? Caleb asked. School says there isn't one. Then do not anchor into that wall. The foreman glanced at Caleb's jacket. You with the district? No. Then I have a signed review and you have an opinion. Caleb stepped back. Yes. For now. That evening, he took Lily to the public records room at City Hall. Together, they searched permit folders until closing. The latest survey was missing, but they found the original structural plans from 18 years earlier. The title block carried the name Mercer Structural Collaborative. Beneath it was Caleb's faded signature. Lily touched the paper. You designed their auditorium, the lateral reinforcement and exit canopy. Hannah designed the daylight system. It was the first time he had said her mother's name in connection with the school. Lily looked up at the high clerestory windows drawn in delicate lines. Mom made that light? She made sure it reached the back row. For several minutes, they stood together over the plans, not as engineer and student, but as the 2 remaining members of a family discovering that the third had left something luminous behind. Caleb copied the pages showing the canopy loads and foundation notes. One note required a new soil assessment before any exterior landing modification. Grant's proposal ignored it. The next day, Caleb emailed the documents to Vale, Principal Harlan, and the district facilities director. He did not mention his signature. He highlighted the assessment requirement and requested that construction pause. Vale replied within 9 minutes. Thank you for your concern. Qualified professionals have reviewed the project. Construction continued. Then the first spring storm arrived. Water pooled beside the new ramp. The auditorium exit door jammed during rehearsal, trapping 30 seniors inside for 4 minutes until a custodian forced it open. No one was hurt. Vale called it a swollen frame caused by humidity. Caleb examined the door after everyone left. The upper hinge had moved nearly a 1/4 inch. A hairline crack climbed from the masonry canopy toward the clerestory windows Hannah had designed. He placed a strip of removable paper tape across the crack and marked the time. By morning, the tape had torn. That was not humidity. Caleb called Daniel Kress directly. At first, Kress sounded annoyed. Then Caleb read the original foundation note aloud. Silence filled the line. Where did you get that drawing? Kress asked. City Archive. The district packet did not include it. Did your review include a site visit? Kress exhaled. Vale said the grant deadline required a desktop approval. She sent photographs. Photographs of the crack? Another silence. Kress promised to inspect the site Monday. On Sunday evening, Caleb received a message from him containing only 6 words. Meeting canceled. District resolved the concern. Monday morning, the paper tape was gone. Fresh gray filler covered the crack. Lily stood beside Caleb in the empty corridor. They are hiding it. He looked at the smooth strip of filler, then at the security camera above the exit. Someone is, he said. For the first time, the question was no longer whether Lily had designed her own ramp. The question was why adults entrusted with hundreds of children were willing to erase evidence rather than postpone a ceremony. Caleb began building a record the way he once investigated structural failures. Slowly, without assuming the conclusion. He measured the door gap at sunrise and after afternoon heat. He photographed the crack from the public corridor. He requested rainfall records and compared them with movement marks. Every observation went into the dented lunchbox beneath his truck seat. Lily built her own record. From the loose pages in the kitchen drawer, she reconstructed the sequence of her calculations. Each page showed pressure marks from the one above it and timestamps from photos she had sent a classmate. Her design process was not merely plausible, it was traceable. What neither of them possessed was the blue notebook Vale had locked away. Then Ava Salgado, a classmate who used a wheelchair, came to their duplex with her mother. Ava had tested Lily's original model during lunch periods. She remembered Vale asking Lily to demonstrate the wide landing, and she had a short phone video of it. Grant's ramp is prettier, Ava said, but I cannot turn on it without hitting the rail. Her mother, Elena, explained that 3 families had complained. Each received the same response. The design met professional standards. Caleb watched Ava maneuver through the mock landing Lily had rebuilt on the kitchen floor with painter's tape. She turned cleanly inside Lily's dimensions. In Grant's dimensions, her rear wheel crossed the boundary. Would you demonstrate this to the board? Caleb asked. Ava looked at her mother, then nodded. If they let Lily stand beside me. The next board meeting was scheduled 2 days before graduation. Caleb submitted a request to speak. Vale called again, but her composure had begun to fray. You are turning a student disappointment into a public spectacle, she said. Pause the ramp and release Lily's notebook. The notebook is committee material. It belongs to a student. Mr. Mercer, you are a contractor with a grievance. Please do not present yourself as something else. Caleb studied Hannah's old engineering seal on the shelf above his workbench. I have presented myself accurately every time. At the board meeting, the public comment list was changed without notice. Facilities Matters moved to a closed session. Caleb's name disappeared from the speaker sheet. Russell Holloway presented a ceremonial check for $50,000 while cameras flashed. Vale praised the new ramp as proof that partnerships could overcome limited public budgets. When Ava's mother attempted to speak, a board attorney told her accessibility certification would be handled administratively. Caleb felt Lily's hand tighten around his sleeve. This was the moment he usually withdrew. The moment when institutions turned procedure into a locked door. He stood. The exit canopy has moved 5/16 of an inch in 12 days, he said. Conversation stopped. The board chair struck the microphone button. Sir, you are out of order. The new landing transfers water toward a foundation already showing differential settlement. The exit door has jammed once. It will jam again. Vale rose from the staff table. This man was recently removed as a school vendor. His statements should be understood in that context. Caleb's temper broke. Not into shouting, but into one sentence colder than he intended. And yours should be understood in the context of children you are willing to put beneath a failing canopy. Lily stared at him. Vale went pale. The board chair ordered security to escort him out. In the parking lot, Caleb apologized to Lily. For telling the truth? She asked. For using it like a weapon before I had proved every part. That distinction mattered to him. Rage could be correct and still be careless. The proof arrived from an unexpected but logical place. The next afternoon, the school custodian, Walter Briggs, visited Caleb's workshop. Walter had replaced the paper tape after Vale ordered it removed. He had also saved the maintenance log Vale told him to rewrite. The original log documented water intrusion for 7 months, repeated door misalignment, and 2 requests for structural inspection. The revised electronic version described minor cosmetic maintenance. Why did you keep it? Caleb asked. Walter rubbed his cap between both hands. Because my grandson graduates in that gym. And because your wife once made the district install daylight controls after they told her windows were good enough. She listened to custodians. The lunchbox now held measurements, original plans, Lily's drafts, Ava's test video, and Walter's maintenance log. Still, Caleb wanted an independent inspection before making an accusation. He called Cress again and offered to meet without district staff. Cress arrived after dark. He carried a laser level and the anxious expression of a man who had discovered that a shortcut had become evidence. Together, they measured the wall, canopy, and landing. The foundation had settled beyond the original tolerance. The decorative cedar assembly blocked drainage and concealed the worst crack. "Close the exit," Cress said. "Tonight. Put it in writing." Cress looked toward the school. "If I sign that, the district will say I approved bad work. You approved incomplete information. Decide whether you want that to remain your worst decision." Cress signed a temporary hazard notice at 11:42 p.m. at 7:10 the next morning. Vale removed it from the door. Graduation rehearsal was scheduled for 9. She had already received calls from donors, vendors, and local media. Canceling would expose the rushed grant process and perhaps cost the program she believed she was protecting. She convinced herself that the canopy had stood for 18 years and could stand 3 more days. Fear did not make her dishonest all at once. It made each dishonest choice feel temporary. Caleb sent the signed notice to the superintendent and fire marshal. The superintendent's assistant acknowledged receipt. The fire marshal was inspecting a warehouse fire outside the county. No immediate closure came. At rehearsal, a hard gust moved through the open exit. Dust fell from the canopy joint. Caleb, watching from the public sidewalk, entered and pulled the alarm before anyone else reacted. Students evacuated through the opposite doors. Vale accused him of creating panic. Minutes later, a narrow strip of masonry veneer fell onto the empty ramp. No one could call the danger cosmetic anymore. The district closed that exit and installed a temporary barrier. Graduation moved from the auditorium to the gymnasium. The grant committee announced an internal review but insisted the ceremony would proceed. Lily expected the evidence to clear her. Instead, Vale removed her from the student speaker program. The official email cited disruption surrounding a submission with unresolved authorship concerns. Her diploma would be issued, but she would not deliver the senior address she had earned through class rank. Caleb read the message twice. The lunchbox sat open before him. He could release everything to the press that night. A local reporter had already left 2 voicemails. Doing so might force the school to reverse course, but it would turn Lily's graduation into a scandal before she had chosen whether she wanted that. "What do you want?" he asked her. Lily looked at the refrigerator drawing he had taped back into place. "I want to graduate," she said, "and I want them to hear Ava. What about your speech? They can take my place on the program. They cannot decide whether I have something to say." Caleb nodded. "Then we do it your way." They spent the night organizing copies into 63 numbered pages. Lily wrote no attack. She wrote about access, authorship, and the people whose labor disappeared behind polished plaques. Caleb made one request: facts first, anger second. Graduation morning arrived bright and humid. Caleb finished a porch repair before noon because he still needed the payment. He changed his shirt but kept the brown work jacket. The clean blazer in his closet no longer fit. In the truck, the lunchbox rested beside a small bouquet for Lily. At the gym entrance, a volunteer directed him toward general seating. His assigned ticket was in the donor section because Lily was graduating with highest honors. Vale intercepted him before he reached it. Her gaze moved over the plaster on his sleeve. "The donor section is reserved, Mr. Mercer," she said. "Work clothes do not become appropriate simply because your daughter is graduating around them." Parents slowed. A phone camera lifted. Caleb held out the printed ticket. "I am not asking for a better seat. I am asking you not to punish Lily for being my daughter." Vale took the ticket and tore the perforated donor stub from it. "Lily is experiencing the consequence of an unresolved process." The gym doors opened behind her. On stage, graduates began filing toward their chairs. Lily saw her father being moved to the back, and for the first time in her life, she stepped out of line. Lily crossed the gym floor while the processional music continued. Principal Harlan whispered for her to return to her chair. She walked past him, climbed the stage steps, and reached the microphone before anyone decided whether stopping a graduating student on camera would look worse than letting her speak. Vale followed with Lily's diploma cover in hand. "Before you take my diploma," Lily said, "every parent here deserves to know what my father did for their children." The gym settled into a silence so complete that the ventilation system seemed suddenly loud. Lily did not begin with the crack, the altered maintenance log, or her own disqualification. She began with names. She named Ava Salgado, whose chair could turn on the landing Lily designed but not on the one donors preferred. She named Walter Briggs, who had reported water damage for 7 months. She named 3 families whose porch rails Caleb had repaired without invoices, 2 students whose bedroom desks he had built from discarded library shelves, and a widowed mother whose furnace enclosure he rebuilt after a contractor left it unsafe. Parents looked toward Caleb one after another. He had never told the families that other families had received the same quiet help. He had treated each repair as a private promise. Lily held up her blue spiral notebook. Vale's hand moved instinctively toward the cabinet key hanging at her waist. The notebook should still have been locked in her office. "Messrs. Vale returned this to my graduation table 20 minutes ago," Lily said. "But these are not all my pages." She opened it beneath the document camera used for award certificates. On the gym screens appeared a clean calculation sheet bearing Lily's name. Then she placed one of her original loose pages beside it. The numbers matched, but the erased construction lines did not. The notebook version had been recopied. Vale stepped toward the microphone. "This ceremony is not an evidentiary hearing." "No," Caleb said from the aisle. "It is where you chose to make the accusation public." He walked forward carrying the lunchbox. He did not hurry. He did not raise his voice. Parents moved aside before he reached them. Principal Harlan asked security to wait. Superintendent Elaine Ward had entered through the side doors with Daniel Kress and the district attorney. The fire marshal followed carrying a red inspection folder. Ward took the stage. "Master." Mercer submitted evidence concerning both student records and an immediate facility hazard. The board opened an external review this morning. Vale's face lost color. "I was not notified." The integrity of the review required that. Caleb placed the lunchbox on the awards table and removed the original plans first. "Sheet 4.2, he said. "Foundation Note 9 requires a new soil assessment before modification of the west exit landing. Revision Table 3 shows no later waiver." The grant review used an incomplete drawing set. Kress confirmed it. He described his desktop approval, the photographs that concealed the crack, and the hazard notice removed from the door. Walter's paper maintenance log appeared on the screens beside the rewritten electronic entries. Russell Holloway rose from the donor section. "Are you saying my son's design caused this?" "Your son entered a school competition," Caleb replied. "Adults decided to build an unverified concept. Do not give a child responsibility that belongs to us." The answer stopped Russell more effectively than blame would have. The district attorney displayed access records. Vale's credentials had opened Lily's digital submission twice after the authorship complaint. A committee assistant, questioned that morning, admitted Vale instructed her to create a clean comparison copy of selected calculations. Vale had believed the copy would demonstrate professional influence. Instead, removing Lily's sketches destroyed the evidence of how a student actually thinks. "I was protecting the grant," Vale said. Her words came thinner now. "Those programs employ people. They serve children no one else funds." Caleb faced her. "You were protecting a result. You do not understand what disappears when donors leave. I understand load paths. When one support carries everything, the structure is already failing." He turned to the screens and pointed to Lily's original landing calculations. Line 14 accounts for rear wheel sweep. Line 22 adjusts the slope after Ava's first test. The correction in the margin is Lily's. I did not teach her that solution. Ava did. Vale looked down at the diploma cover in her hand. Superintendent Ward then asked the question Vale had avoided from the beginning. "Master." "Mercer, on what basis are you qualified to authenticate the original structural plans?" Caleb unfolded the title page. His faded seal and signature filled both screens. "I designed the lateral reinforcement and exit canopy 18 years ago," he said. "My wife designed the daylight system. I left engineering after she died." A murmur moved through the gym and vanished. He continued in the same flat voice. "That history does not make Lily's work mine. It is how I know the difference." Vale's pen slipped from the diploma cover and struck the stage floor. No one bent to retrieve it. Lily turned back to the microphone. She could have demanded an apology. She could have described every private insult. Instead, she asked Ava to come forward. Ava rolled up the center aisle while her mother carried the cardboard model. Together, the two girls demonstrated the turning radius. Lily explained the design in plain language, then asked the board to fund an independent accessibility review before spending another $1 on plaques. The first person to stand was Walter Briggs. The second was Ava's mother. Then a father near the back recognized Caleb as the man who had repaired his daughter's desk. A woman in the 5th row remembered the porch rail. Another parent remembered a ramp Caleb had built on a Sunday and never built. Chairs scraped backward in widening waves. Within seconds, nearly every parent in the gym was standing. They were not applauding hidden wealth or a grand title. They were acknowledging labor they had benefited from without seeing, and a girl who had refused to let that labor be used against her. Caleb looked at Lily. She pressed 2 fingers against her graduation gown. The signal returned to him. Slow down. Know what is true. Then she smiled. The external review produced consequences, though not the theatrical kind people expected. Vale was removed from committee authority and placed on administrative leave. The district referred the altered records for professional investigation. Kress accepted a formal reprimand and volunteered his firm to complete the independent survey without charge. Russell Holloway withdrew the condition that his donation fund a named wall. The money went instead to repairs and accessibility testing. Vale requested a meeting with Caleb and Lily 3 weeks later. They met in the school library beside the shelving Caleb had never been paid to finish. "I told myself I was saving programs," she said. "Every compromise looked smaller than the loss I feared," Lily asked. "When did I become one of the things you could lose?" Vale had no polished answer. That was the beginning of an honest one. She apologized without requesting forgiveness. Lily accepted the apology without pretending trust returned immediately. Caleb asked only that the school correct Lily's record and pay Walter the overtime he had been denied while documenting the leaks. The board offered Caleb a consulting contract to oversee the repairs. The fee would have cleared his debts and replaced his truck. He stared at the number longer than he wished Lily to notice. Allergy medicine, electric bills, and years of saying no had made money impossible to treat as an abstract test of virtue. He accepted a limited contract at the standard public rate, with one condition. He would be home by 5 on every day Lily was home before college. He was not interested in proving that good men refuse money. Good men pay their bills. He was interested in refusing to lose his family to work a second time. During the summer, the district removed Grant's cedar assembly and stabilized the foundation. Lily's Landing became the basis for the permanent accessible route after licensed engineers refined it with Ava's continued testing. A small plaque near the ramp named the Student Accessibility Team, not a donor. On Lily's last evening before college, she and Caleb ate sandwiches on the repaired back steps of their duplex. His new consulting folder lay unopened inside. Hannah's original daylight sketch hung above the kitchen table. "Do you miss engineering?" Lily asked. Caleb listened to the neighborhood settling into dusk. The click of a bicycle chain, a screen door closing, someone measuring a board in a nearby garage. "I missed believing the work mattered," he said. "That was not the same thing." Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. "Does it matter again?" He looked at the widened ramp across the school field, catching the last band of light from windows Hannah had drawn. "Yes," he said, "but so does getting home. People often mistake visibility for value. They notice the name on a wall, but not the hands that kept the wall upright. The polished speech, but not the child who tested every uncertain step. The authority at the microphone, but not the custodian preserving one honest page. A person dismissed today may be carrying knowledge, grief, and quiet acts of service that no resume could fully contain. Dignity is not endless silence, and humility is not permission for others to erase the truth. Sometimes strength means speaking with an even voice when anger would be easier. Sometimes it means standing when someone else finally speaks. And sometimes a father teaches his child to hold her ground, only to discover that she has taught an entire room to rise.